The rain fell hard that night, cold and restless. The forest outside David's cabin was dark. Only the lightning showed the shapes of tall trees swaying in the wind. David sat near the small heater, fixing an old oxygen filter he had brought from his days on Mars. He liked quiet nights like this, no people, no voices, just the sound of rain and tools clicking together. Then he heard it. A soft knock on the door. Barely a sound. At first he thought it was the storm, maybe a branch hitting the wood. He ignored it and kept working, but then the knock came again. Louder this time, slow, steady, 3 clear taps. David froze. He lived miles away from any other house. No one ever came here. He stood up carefully, every instinct telling him something wasn't right. The wind howled outside. The lights flickered and then silence. No more knocking, he waited, holding his breath. Then came a whisper from outside, faint but real. Please. Help! His heart jumped. That wasn't the wind, it was a voice. Small, trembling, and scared, David grabbed his flashlight and slowly opened the door. The light cut through the rain, and there she was, a little girl standing alone, soaked to the bone, her hair clinging to her face, but something about her was wrong. Her skin shimmered faintly like silver mist, and her eyes glowed with a pale blue light. For a moment, David thought he was dreaming. The girl looked up at him and said, "Please, my mother is dying." Her voice cracked with fear. David's hands trembled on the door handle. He stared at her, unable to speak. He had seen strange things before. Back when he worked as an engineer for the Mars colonization project, he had repaired machines meant to help humans breathe on alien worlds. He had seen light storms that melted metal, and shadows that moved on their own. But he had never seen a child like this. She looked half human, half something else and something not from Earth. David stepped aside, his voice soft. "Come inside." The girl nodded and stepped in, dripping water on the wooden floor. She looked around the small cabin, tools, wires, metal parts everywhere. David grabbed a blanket from the chair and wrapped it around her shoulders. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lyra," she whispered, still shaking. Her eyes darted to the window as if something was out there watching. "Lyra, where's your mother?" David asked, kneeling down to her level. "In the forest," she said, voice trembling. "She can't breathe." "They hurt her." "Who?" he asked. "The Watchers," she said, the word barely a breath. David frowned. "Watchers? Who are they?" But Lyra only shook her head, tears running down her glowing cheeks. David didn't know what to think. He looked outside. The storm was worse now, thunder shaking the ground. He wanted to believe this was just a lost child, but nothing about her was normal, and yet he couldn't ignore her, not with that fear in her voice. "All right," he said quietly. "We'll find your mother. But first you need to warm up." He gave her water, but she didn't drink it. Instead, she touched the cup, and the water turned faintly silver. David blinked, shocked. What did you just do?" Lyra looked away. "It's how we clean it," she said softly. "We can't drink your kind's water, it burns." David's chest tightened. "Your kind?" he repeated. She nodded slowly. "We live in the deep forest under the ground. We hide from the Watchers and from humans too." David sat back, confused and speechless. He had heard rumors about alien activity in this region, but nothing proven. He thought all of that was government nonsense. But now one of them was sitting in his cabin, shivering under a blanket. And she was just a child. "Why did you come to me?" he asked. Lyra's silver eyes met his. "Because you fix things." David blinked. "Fix things?" "You fix lungs," she said. "Machines that help people breathe. I read about you." Her voice shook as she spoke. "You can help my mother breathe again." David's heart stopped for a second. She knew about his old project, the one that failed years ago. Artificial lungs designed for Mars workers. He hadn't told anyone about it since leaving the program. "How do you even know that?" he whispered. Lyra looked at him, eyes full of hope and fear. "Because my mother told me your name before she got sick." Thunder roared outside. Making the cabin shake, David stood still, staring at her. This was impossible, and yet somehow it was happening. The girl's mother, an alien, was dying somewhere in the dark forest, and for reasons he didn't understand, they believed only he could save her. He felt something deep in his chest, and fear, confusion, but also purpose. For the first time in years, someone needed him again. He looked at the rain outside, then back at Lyra. "All right," he said softly. "Show me where she is." Lyra's glowing eyes filled with tears of relief. She took his hand, small and cold. "Thank you," she whispered. And as they stepped into the storm, David didn't know that this night, this one knock at midnight, would change everything. The rain had not stopped, and the forest was darker than ever. David followed Lyra through the muddy path, his flashlight cutting weak lines through the fog. Each step echoed like a whisper, the air heavy with something that didn't belong to Earth. He could feel it, the energy around them, soft but strange, like the forest itself was alive. Lyra moved fast for someone so small, her feet barely touching the ground. Her silver hair glowed faintly, a light that shimmered against the trees. David's heart pounded as he tried to keep up. He still couldn't understand how this had happened, how a human like him had ended up following an alien child into a forbidden forest. He shouted over the rain, "How far is your mother?" Lyra looked back and pointed ahead. "Not far. She's under the old stone hills." Her voice was tired, and her breathing uneven. David noticed she was limping slightly, her leg bruised and bleeding. He stopped, kneeling down. "You're hurt," he said. "I'm fine," she replied quickly. But he saw the pain in her eyes without saying a word. He tore a piece of his sleeve and wrapped it around her leg. The warmth of her skin felt different, colder, smoother, almost metallic. "Thank you," she whispered. David nodded. "Let's keep moving." The forest lights flickered, small glowing insects flying in circles. Reacting to Lyra's presence, she looked at them sadly. "They used to follow my mother," she said softly. "Now they run away. Because she's sick?" David asked. "Yes," Lyra replied. "Her body is shutting down, her air veins are breaking." David frowned. "Air veins?" She thought for a moment, searching for the human word. "Lungs," she said finally. "My mother can't breathe your air anymore." David's chest tightened. He remembered his old invention, the prototype lungs he built for Mars miners, the one that failed during testing, the one that caused the company to shut down his entire project, and now, years later, an alien child was asking him to fix her dying mother's lungs. It felt impossible, yet something in her voice made him believe it could be done. As they walked deeper, David noticed strange markings on the trees, circular symbols glowing faint blue under the rain. "What are those?" he asked. Lyra looked scared. "It means they're near," she said quietly. "Who?" David asked. "The Watchers," she whispered. "They protect our laws. They don't allow humans to touch us. They will destroy anyone who tries." David's heart sank. "Then why bring me?" "Because you're not like the others," she said, looking straight at him. "You fix life, not take it." Her words hit him hard. He remembered the day he quit the Mars project, when they used his designs for soldiers instead of patients. That was the day he swore never to build anything again. Yet here he was, carrying his old medical scanner in his backpack, hoping it could still help someone. The ground became slippery and Lyra stumbled. David caught her before she fell. She looked up at him, her eyes glowing brighter. "You're kind," she said softly. "No," he replied. "I'm just doing what anyone would do." She shook her head. No one else would have opened the door. Her words stayed with him as they moved on. The storm began to quiet, and only the sound of dripping water filled the silence. Soon they reached a wide clearing. In the middle stood an enormous stone arch covered in moss and light blue symbols. Lyra walked toward it and pressed her hand against one of the symbols. The ground shook lightly and the stones began to move, revealing a hidden tunnel underneath. David's eyes widened. "What is this place?" "Our home," she said, her voice trembling. "Or what's left of it." As they stepped into the tunnel, the air changed. It was warm, glowing softly from crystals embedded in the walls. David felt a strange vibration in the air, like the place itself was breathing. Lyra spoke quietly. "We used to live down here before humans came. Before the Watchers made the law." David frowned. "What law?" "The one that says our kind and yours must never mix," she said. "It's forbidden to even speak to humans." "Then why break it?" he asked. "Because my mother said hope can't follow laws," Lyra replied, her small voice echoing through the tunnel. They walked for what felt like hours. Finally, Lyra stopped near a stone door covered in cracks. She placed her hand on it and it opened with a low hum. The room beyond glowed faintly blue, filled with broken machines and alien tools. In the center, lying on a metal bed, was her mother. David froze. The alien woman's skin shimmered like liquid glass, her chest moving weakly, every breath a struggle. Strange dark lines spread across her neck. Pulsing slowly like veins, Lyra ran to her side. "Mother, I brought him," she whispered. Holding her hand, the woman opened her eyes, faint light glowing within them, and looked at David. "You are human," she said weakly, her voice like wind. David nodded slowly. "Yes." Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Then maybe there is still a chance." The machines around them flickered, some sparking, others dead. David looked around, realizing this wasn't just a sick body. It was a dying world in one room. He stepped closer, his mind racing. If he could connect his old oxygen converter to her air system, maybe, just maybe, he could keep her alive. But then a deep rumble echoed above them. Lyra looked up, her face pale with fear. "They found us," she whispered. David turned toward the tunnel, the lights flickering red. "The Watchers," she said again, her voice shaking. "They're coming." The forest was no longer silent. A low humming sound echoed through the trees, deep and steady, like the forest itself was breathing. David could feel the vibration under his feet as if something huge was moving beneath the ground. Lyra clung to his arm, her glowing eyes wide with fear. "They're close," she whispered. "The Watchers can track the air." Her voice shook, and David felt her hand trembling against his sleeve. He turned back toward the tunnel, the faint blue lights flickering behind them. He could still see her mother lying weakly on the table, the faint rise and fall of her chest slowing with every minute. He wanted to stay, to help, but Lyra's fear told him what he already knew. If the Watchers found them, they'd all be dead before he could finish. He grabbed his backpack and motioned to her. "We move now?" Lyra hesitated, looking back at her mother. Tears glowing silver in her eyes, David knelt beside her. "Listen to me. I'll come back for her, but if we die here, no one will save her." The girl nodded, wiping her face, and together they slipped out into the night. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the air was heavy and wet. The forest glowed faintly under the light of strange blue spores floating through the air. David moved carefully, scanning the path with his flashlight. "Who are they, really?" he asked in a low voice. Lyra looked around nervously before speaking. "They are the Watchers of Balance. They protect the secret laws between our world and yours," she said softly. "They don't allow humans to help us or to hurt us, they just erase both," David frowned. "Erase? They burn the ground and remove every trace," she said, her voice breaking. "That's what they did to our village." David stopped walking, his heart pounding. "You mean there were more like you?" "Yes," she said quietly. "Hundreds." Her voice trembled as she continued. "They came when we tried to speak with humans. My father thought peace was possible, but they called it corruption. They said humans bring sickness, so they burned everything." The words hung heavy in the wet air. David clenched his fists, anger building in his chest. He remembered the corporations back on Mars, the ones who called themselves saviors but destroyed lives for profit. Now here it was again, power deciding who was allowed to live. Suddenly a red light flashed across the trees. David pulled Lyra down behind a fallen log. The light moved slowly, scanning. It wasn't a drone. It was something alive, floating silently. Its body a mix of metal and mist, Lyra whispered. "Watcher Scout." David held his breath as the glowing shape drifted closer, humming like a swarm of bees. He could see the pattern of red symbols pulsing along its side. "It was scanning for heat," he whispered. "They can't see us if we stay cold." He pressed his hand over Lyra's mouth to stop her breathing sounds, both of them motionless as the drone passed. When it was gone, they waited a long moment before moving again. Lyra's small hand gripped his tightly. "Why are you helping us?" she asked suddenly. David paused, unsure how to answer. "I don't know," he said after a moment. "Maybe because I've failed to help others before." She looked at him. Confused, he smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I built something once, something meant to save lives, but it only caused pain." "You're trying again," she said softly. "Yeah," he whispered. "Maybe this time I can do it right." The trees grew thicker, the path narrower. David could feel the ground changing beneath his boots. A soft vibration, almost like a heartbeat. Lyra stopped and pressed her palm to a nearby tree. The bark glowed under her touch, showing faint lines of light spreading outward. "This forest knows who walks in it," she said. David blinked. "You mean it's alive?" "In a way," she nodded. "It remembers. It protects those it loves." The ground shifted suddenly. a pulse of energy rippling through the roots. David stumbled as bright lines appeared across the forest floor. Forming a path ahead, Lyra gasped softly. "It's helping us." They followed the glowing path, moving faster. Behind them, the hum of the watchers grew louder. Red lights danced in the distance, searching, burning small parts of the forest as they moved. David's lungs burned from running, but he didn't stop. He could see something ahead, an opening in the trees. A deep pool of light. "Down there," Lyra said, pointing. "The air is safe." They slid down a muddy slope into a hollow filled with glowing roots. The air here was warmer, almost electric. Lyra placed her hands together and whispered something in her language. The roots moved, wrapping gently around them, forming a shield of light. "What is this?" David asked, his voice trembling with awe. "It's an old defense," she said. "My mother built it before she got sick." David sat back, catching his breath above them. He could see the watchers moving through the trees, their red light fading into the distance. For a moment, silence returned. Lyra leaned against the glowing roots, her voice soft. "She said humans could fix what we broke." David looked at her. "What did you break?" Lyra hesitated, then whispered, "The air." He frowned. "The air?" She nodded slowly. "Our kind changed it long ago, to make it fit us, but it began to kill your kind. So they made the law to keep us apart." David's eyes widened. The air between species, poisoned by survival itself. And now her mother was dying from the very air she once helped create. Thunder rumbled in the far distance again. David looked at his scanner, its light blinking faintly. He had an idea forming in his mind, a dangerous one. If he could build something that balanced both types of air, human and alien, maybe he could save not only her mother, but both worlds. But first, they had to survive the night. He turned to Lyra, who was slowly falling asleep beside the glowing roots. He whispered, "Rest now. I'll keep watch." She smiled faintly, whispering, "Thank you, human." Before her eyes closed, David looked out into the dark forest, red lights flickering far away like eyes. He tightened his grip on his old toolkit and muttered, "They want balance," he said quietly. "I'll give it to them." The wind rose again, and in the distance the watcher's hum returned. The hunt was not over, and the dark woods had only begun to show their secrets. The air inside the cave was thick and heavy. David could hear it, the faint, uneven breathing coming from the center of the room. Each breath sounded like a whisper and a cry at the same time. Lyra ran ahead, kneeling beside the figure on the metal bed, her small hands glowing faintly as she touched her mother's face. "Mother," she whispered, "I brought him." The alien woman opened her eyes slowly, her pupils glowing white-blue in the dim light. Her face was beautiful but fragile, her skin like liquid glass cracked with dark veins. David stepped closer, his heart tightening at the sight. The faint sound of her breathing came and went like waves breaking on a distant shore. She looked at him weakly. "You are human." David nodded, setting down his backpack. "Lyra told me you're sick." The alien woman smiled faintly. "Sick? No, dying." Her voice was soft, like wind brushing through leaves, but every word seemed to hurt her lungs. Lyra held her hand tightly, tears shimmering on her cheeks. "You can fix her," she said to David, her voice full of hope and fear. "Please." "You can fix her." David took out his old medical scanner. The device whirred to life, glowing green as it scanned the alien body. Numbers flickered across the screen, symbols he didn't fully understand. But one thing was clear. Her oxygen levels were dropping fast. Her lungs, if he could even call them that, were collapsing under internal pressure. They were not made for Earth's air. "Not anymore," he muttered under his breath. "She's suffocating." Lyra looked at him, eyes wide. "What does that mean?" "It means," David said quietly, "she doesn't have long." He felt a knot in his stomach, the same kind he felt years ago when his human patient died in the Mars Colony Clinic. He had promised himself he'd never feel that again, never face that helplessness again. But now it was back, burning in his chest. He searched his backpack, pulling out the pieces of his old project, the artificial lung module. It was broken, covered in dust and rust, but it was all he had. He had built it to help humans breathe in thin Martian air. Maybe with some changes it could help her. But he didn't know how her body would react. Human technology mixed with alien biology could kill her instantly. Still, he couldn't just stand there and do nothing. He rolled up his sleeves, his hands shaking slightly. Lyra watched him silently, her glowing eyes filled with desperate hope. He said softly, "If I fail, promise me you'll run." She shook her head. "I won't leave her," David sighed. "Then stay close, and pray the Watchers don't find us first." He placed the small metal device on the alien woman's chest. Connecting wires and tubes carefully, the device hummed weakly. Old but still working. He began soldering small connections with his portable tool, the sound of sparks echoing in the cave. Every now and then the woman coughed, her breath growing shorter, her glowing skin dimming. Lyra whispered softly in her mother's ear, speaking in her native tongue, words David couldn't understand. But he could feel the emotion, love, sorrow, and a kind of ancient fear. The kind of fear that came from watching someone fade away. He looked at the screen. The oxygen levels were near zero. He had minutes, maybe less. "Come on," he muttered, tightening the final seal. "Just hold on a little longer." The alien woman's hand reached out, trembling, touching his wrist. "You risk much," she whispered. "The law forbids this." David didn't look up. "Then they can take it up with me later." Her weak smile flickered. "You sound like my mate." Lyra looked up suddenly, tears in her eyes. "My father?" The woman nodded faintly. "He helped humans once too, and paid for it." David's throat tightened. "What happened to him?" "He was erased," she said simply, before another fit of coughing shook her body. David finished connecting the final line and pressed the activation switch. The device buzzed, sending a soft pulse of light through the tube. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the alien woman gasped, her chest rising sharply as air rushed in. Lyra cried out, "It's working!" David's heart leapt. The scanner showed a faint rise in oxygen. He exhaled a shaky breath of relief. "Good," he whispered. "Just stay with us," but then the lights flickered. A deep rumble rolled through the ground, and red flashes appeared near the cave entrance. Lyra turned, fear filling her face. "They found us," she said. David's blood ran cold. The Watchers. He could hear the mechanical hum, the low drone of machines searching getting closer. He looked at the device. It wasn't strong enough to move with her. It was wired to the table. If they stayed, they'd all die. If they ran, she'd die. David made his choice. He grabbed his toolkit. Cutting the wires to make the device portable, Lyra cried, "What are you doing?" "Saving her," he said, his hands moving fast. "We're taking her with us." He pulled the cables loose, wrapped the main unit around her chest, and lifted her gently. She was lighter than he expected, fragile. Almost weightless. "Lyra, help me," he said. Together they carried her toward the tunnel exit. Her breathing soft but steady for now. The humming outside grew louder, red lights flashing against the cave walls. The Watchers were descending, their shadows stretching across the stone. David gritted his teeth, running faster. He didn't know if the device would hold or if he could escape. But he knew one thing. He wasn't letting this family die. Not again. Behind them, the air glowed red. Ahead, the dark woods waited, silent and alive. David whispered under his breath, "If this is madness, then let it be worth it." And with Lyra by his side and her mother in his arms, he ran into the storm of fate that was already waiting for them. The rain returned like a storm of whispers. Cold and endless, David ran through the dark forest, carrying Lyra's mother in his arms, her faint breathing echoing like a fragile rhythm against his chest. Lyra ran beside him, clutching the small light orb that guided their way, its glow barely cutting through the fog. Behind them, the forest roared with noise and the sound of machines, wings and voices that didn't belong to this world. The Watchers were coming. The air itself seemed to change, turning thick and heavy. Red lights moved between the trees like hunting eyes. David could hear the metallic hum of their scanners, feel the vibration through the ground. He whispered, "Keep low," and dropped behind a fallen log, pulling Lyra close. She clung to him, her tiny hands shaking. Her mother lay motionless in his arms, the artificial lung device pulsing weakly with blue light. David peeked over the log. 3 Watchers glided through the mist, tall, metallic figures wrapped in black armor, their heads shaped like smooth glass domes glowing red from within. They didn't walk, they floated, silent but powerful. Each one carried a weapon that looked like a living machine, part energy, part bone. The sound of their language echoed through the trees. Deep and cold, Lyra whispered. "They're talking to the forest. They can hear everything breathe." David frowned. "Then we move before it breathes again." They crawled quietly through the undergrowth. every twig crunching like thunder under David's boots. He tried to move faster, but the alien woman in his arms felt weaker by the second. Her breathing slowed, her skin dimming. He looked at the device. The power levels were dropping fast. "The battery was dying, Lyra," he whispered. "We need energy. Now." She looked around frantically, then pointed to a glowing tree nearby, its roots humming softly. "That tree," she said. "It carries current through the ground. My mother used to draw energy from it." David rushed toward it, laying her mother down gently at the base. He pulled out his toolkit and stripped 2 wires from the machine. Pressing them into the glowing bark, the tree reacted instantly. Lines of light surged through it. Traveling down into the device, the hum grew stronger, and her mother's chest lifted again. Lyra smiled weakly. "It's working." But the moment of relief didn't last. A deep mechanical roar filled the air, shaking the leaves. David turned and saw one of the watchers standing at the edge of the clearing. Its mask flickered with crimson light. Its body shifting like molten metal, Lyra gasped. "They found us." The watcher raised its arm, and a bright red beam shot toward them. David dove to the ground. Rolling as the beam scorched the tree, splitting it in half, flames erupted instantly. Glowing blue instead of orange, he grabbed Lyra and her mother. Pulling them away from the fire, another beam sliced through the ground beside him. The forest screamed, while the trees themselves reacting, bending away from the heat. David turned, pulling the small energy pistol he had built years ago from his bag. It wasn't meant for war, but it was all he had. He fired once and the beam struck the watcher's chest, staggering it. For a second the creature froze, then emitted a shriek that made the air tremble. More red lights appeared in the fog and more watchers. Closing in, David's mind raced. He knew they couldn't fight, not with a dying woman and a child. "Lyra," he said quickly, "is there another way out?" She nodded toward the ravine. "There's an old tunnel under the riverbank. The watchers can't scan through the water." "Then that's where we're going," he said. They ran again, the sounds of pursuit closing in behind them. Branches snapped, the ground shook, and lightning flashed across the sky. The alien mother moaned softly, her voice faint. "You must leave me." David shook his head. "Not a chance." "You can't save me," she whispered. "Save her?" He looked at Lyra, who was crying silently. Her small face streaked with silver tears, he said firmly. "We're saving both." The river roared ahead, dark. Wide and fast, David slid down the muddy slope. Almost losing his balance, the tunnel entrance was barely visible, a small arch hidden behind the waterfall. He looked back. The watchers were close now. Red lights cutting through the fog. Moving like predators, Lyra screamed, "They're right behind us!" David didn't hesitate. He took a deep breath and ran straight through the waterfall, the freezing water hitting him like glass. Inside, the tunnel was narrow and dark. Glowing faintly with the same blue crystals he had seen before, Lyra followed, soaked and shaking. Dragging her mother's hand through the water, the watchers stopped outside, their red lights flickering against the waterfall, unable to enter. The sound of their mechanical roars echoed in frustration. David collapsed inside the tunnel, gasping for breath. He set the alien woman down gently and checked the device. It was still working. Barely, Lyra knelt beside her mother, whispering softly, "We made it. You're safe now." Her mother opened her eyes slowly, her voice weak but calm. "No one is safe." "Not yet." David looked up. "What do you mean?" She turned her gaze toward the glowing walls. "The watchers will not stop," she said. "They will follow until balance is restored." David clenched his fists. He didn't know what balance meant anymore. All he saw was a mother dying and a child crying. He looked at the flickering blue light of the device. At his shaking hands, he whispered to himself, "Then I'll restore it my way." Outside, thunder rolled across the forest as the watchers began to gather. The cave trembled, the walls glowing brighter. And in that moment, David knew the real fight hadn't even begun. The tunnel walls pulsed with a faint blue glow. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling, echoing through the cave like a heartbeat that refused to stop. David sat beside Lyra's mother, his hands shaking as he tried to stabilize the device. The light on the small screen blinked weakly, power failing. Oxygen levels dropping fast. Lyra crouched near her mother, whispering in her language, her silver tears glowing in the dim light. David could feel time slipping through his fingers. Every breath the woman took sounded shallower, weaker. He had already connected his spare batteries. rerouted the power lines, and even used his wrist light as an energy source. But it wasn't enough. Her life was slipping away. Lyra looked up at him, desperate. "Please," she whispered. "You promised to save her." David met her eyes and his voice broke. "I'm trying." He had been here before, years ago in a Mars outpost clinic. Watching his best friend suffocate because the air filters failed, he had sworn never to feel that helpless again. But here it was, happening all over. The alien woman coughed, her glowing skin dimming. David checked her pulse. Faint? "Barely there," he whispered. "Come on, just one more minute." He hit the device casing, trying to restart the flow. It sparked once and then went dark. The hum stopped. The air grew still. Lyra screamed, "No!" She grabbed her mother's hand, shaking her. "Wake up, please." David froze, staring at the silent body. The woman's chest didn't move, her eyes half open, light fading from within. He felt the crushing weight of failure pressing against his chest. I couldn't save her," he muttered, his voice trembling. Lyra fell against her mother, crying softly. "You promised." The tunnel was silent except for her sobs. David turned away, unable to look. He slammed his fist against the stone wall, pain shooting through his arm. He wanted to scream, but no sound came out. He had failed again, failed when it mattered most. But then a faint sound, a single pulse. Like a tiny drum beat echoing in the cave, David froze. Lyra lifted her head, tears still falling. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, another pulse. Stronger this time. He turned toward the device. It was glowing faintly again, blue light flickering back to life. The hum returned, low and steady. Lyra gasped. "She's breathing." David crawled closer, checking the scanner. Oxygen levels rising, heart rhythm stabilizing. The alien woman's chest lifted, slow but steady. Her eyes fluttered open, glowing softly. A faint smile formed on her lips. "I'm still here," she whispered. Lyra threw her arms around her mother. Crying with joy, David sat back. Exhausted but smiling, he looked at the device, the wires sparking softly. He didn't understand how it had restarted, until he noticed the crystal veins running along the tunnel walls. The cave itself was alive, feeding the machine energy. Lyra noticed it too, her eyes wide. "The forest," she whispered. "It's helping her." David ran his hand along the wall, feeling the faint pulse beneath the stone. "It's carrying life through everything," he said softly. Her mother nodded weakly. "Our world is one body." She looked at him, her eyes glowing brighter. "You gave it breath again, for a moment." The three of them just sat there, surrounded by the sound of air and water. The heartbeat in the cave matched the rhythm of the woman's breathing. It was as if the planet itself was exhaling with her. Then came the rumble. The walls shook. Dust falling from above, Lyra's smile faded. "They're back," she said in a whisper. David looked toward the tunnel entrance. Red light spilled through the cracks. The watchers had found them again. The woman struggled to sit up. "You must go," she said weakly. "They will destroy everything to find me." David shook his head. "I'm not leaving you." She looked at him, her expression both sad and calm. "You already did enough," she said softly. "You gave me another heartbeat," but David wasn't listening. He was already scanning the walls for a way out. Lyra tugged on his arm. "There's another path," she said, pointing to a crack in the rock, glowing faintly. "It leads to the root chamber, deep below. The watchers can't reach there." David nodded. "Let's move." He lifted her mother again, careful not to disconnect the wires. The tunnel behind them began to collapse as red beams cut through the rock. The sound of the watchers' weapons echoed like thunder. Lyra led the way, squeezing through narrow spaces, her small light orb guiding them. David followed, breathing hard, the machine humming against his chest. Every second felt borrowed, stolen from fate itself. Finally, they burst into a large cavern. The walls were covered with living roots, glowing golden instead of blue. In the center stood a massive crystal heart, pulsing slowly, each beat echoing like a drum through the earth. Lyra's mother opened her eyes, her voice soft. "This is where I was born." David stared in awe. "It's beautiful." The heart pulsed faster as they stepped closer, reacting to her presence. "The forest knows me," she whispered. "It remembers." Then a beam of red light broke through the wall. The watchers had found the chamber. David turned, shielding Lyra. The air filled with dust and light. One of the watchers entered, its mask glowing red, its voice cold and mechanical. You have broken the law of worlds, it said. You will be erased. David stepped forward. Standing between them. Not today, he said quietly. He grabbed a broken crystal shard from the ground and glowing, alive, and slammed it into the power core of the device. The machine roared, sending a surge of blue energy through the cavern. The crystal heart pulsed violently, sending shockwaves of light through the ground. The Watcher screamed as its armor cracked, collapsing into ash. Lyra's mother gasped as the energy wrapped around her, connecting her heartbeat to the crystal's pulse. Her body began to glow brighter and brighter. David fell to his knees, shielding his eyes from the light. When the glow faded, she stood taller, radiant. Her wounds gone, her breathing strong. Lyra ran to her. "Mother!" The woman smiled, touching her daughter's face. "The heart has accepted me again," she whispered. David looked up at them, his voice shaking. "You're alive," she nodded. "Thanks to you." Then her face turned serious. "But now the balance must be restored," he frowned. "What does that mean?" Before she could answer, the crystal heart pulsed again, sending waves of energy across the entire forest. Outside, the red lights of the Watchers vanished one by one. Lyra grabbed David's hand, her eyes wide with wonder. "The forest is choosing sides," she said softly. And as the light surrounded them, the impossible truth became clear. The forest itself had chosen to fight back. The entire forest glowed like a living storm. Blue light ran through the roots, the ground, even the air itself. David stood at the edge of the great cavern, his breath uneven, his clothes torn, his heart still racing from what he had just witnessed. Lyra's mother stood in the center of the chamber, shining like starlight reborn. Her skin no longer cracked, her lungs no longer failing. The crystal heart pulsed behind her. Matching the rhythm of her new life, Lyra held her mother's hand, tears of joy falling down her cheeks. "You're really alive," she whispered. Her mother smiled softly, her glowing eyes full of love and sadness. "For now," she said quietly, "but not for long." David frowned. Stepping closer, "What do you mean?" "The forest gave me life," she said, "but it demands balance. Something must be taken in return." David's stomach tightened. He knew what she meant before she said it. She looked at him with calm eyes. "It chose to keep me alive by taking its own energy," she pointed upward. And David saw it. The roots above them were dying, the light fading, the forest trembling. The energy that healed her was draining the heart of the planet. "If it continues," she said softly, "everything will die. Humans, my kind, the forest, all of it," Lyra gasped. "No, we can stop it. We can fix it." Her mother shook her head slowly. "Only one thing can fix it. I must return what was given." David's voice cracked. "You can't mean that." She smiled faintly. "Life is always a trade, human." Lyra clung to her, crying, "You just came back. You can't go." Her mother cupped her face gently. "I was never meant to stay." Little light, the chamber shook again. A massive crack formed in the ceiling, letting in flashes of red and blue light. More Watchers were coming, hundreds of them. Their red beams cut through the dark, filling the cave with fire and thunder. David turned, his jaw tightening. "Then we fight." Lyra's mother shook her head. "No, you flee." David grabbed his toolkit, scanning the chamber for something he could use. The crystal heart pulsed violently now, the light growing unstable. He realized it was reacting to the Watchers, absorbing their energy, preparing for something massive. "If it breaks," he said, "it'll destroy everything within miles." Her mother nodded calmly. "Then it will be my heart that breaks with it." Lyra's cries echoed through the chamber. "Please, there has to be another way." David stepped forward, shaking his head. "I won't let you die again." "You can't stop this," she said softly. "You can only decide who lives when it's done." The Watchers entered the cavern, their metallic wings spread wide. Red eyes glowing like molten fire, one of them spoke, its voice cold and thunderous. "Human, you have violated the balance of life." David stood tall, his chest rising and falling. "Then maybe your balance was never fair." The Watcher raised its arm, charging its weapon before it could fire. Lyra's mother stepped in front of him, her hands glowing white. The red beam hit her, but instead of falling, she absorbed it. The light spread through her veins, brighter, hotter, until she looked like a star wrapped in human shape. David shielded his eyes as the light filled the cavern. Lyra screamed, "Mother, no!" The woman turned to David one last time, her voice clear and strong. "Human, you gave me life, now I return it to yours." Her eyes glowed brighter than ever. "Tell your people that we were never the enemy." Then she looked at her daughter, tears of light falling from her eyes. "Live, little one. Live for both of our worlds." The crystal heart exploded in light. A wave of blue energy surged outward, tearing through the cavern, through the forest, through the sky. The watchers were consumed in silence, their red lights fading one by one. The ground shook violently, and then everything went still. When the light faded, the forest was silent. David opened his eyes slowly, coughing through the smoke. He was lying near the edge of a crater where the crystal heart once was. The trees above were glowing faintly again, alive. Breathing, Lyra was beside him, clutching his sleeve. Her eyes red from crying. Her mother was gone. David helped her sit up. She looked around, whispering. She became part of the forest. He nodded quietly, unable to speak. Above them, the night sky cleared for the first time in years. No storm, no fog. Only stars. One of them glowed brighter than the rest, pulsing slowly. Lyra pointed, smiling through her tears. "That's her." David looked up at the sky, his throat tight. "She saved us all," he whispered. Lyra leaned against him, her voice soft and tired. "Humans break rules," she said. "But sometimes, that's how the world heals." David smiled faintly, looking at his trembling hands. The same hands that once caused pain, now had saved a life, maybe more than one. He stood slowly, lifting Lyra in his arms. The forest was calm again, glowing softly like a heartbeat returning to normal. Every step he took echoed with peace instead of fear. He whispered, "Come on, kid, let's go home." "Where is home?" she asked sleepily. He smiled. "Wherever someone still believes in mercy." They walked until the forest opened into light. The sky above shimmered with a strange dawn. Half human blue, half alien silver, the world had changed, and so had they. And somewhere in the heart of the forest, a faint voice whispered through the wind, "Balance restored." David stopped, looking back one last time. He placed his hand on a glowing tree root and whispered, "Thank you." The forest pulsed once, like a gentle heartbeat, and fell silent again. He walked forward, carrying Lyra toward a new beginning, the night behind them, the stars above them, and a promise between two worlds that mercy was never weakness. It was humanity's greatest strength.